So Deconverted Man made a response to my last video. He did not understand the argument I made in that video, but he did make some arguments and bring up some points that I want to address, so I'm making a response to him.
Alright, here we go.
A book of fairy tales that also supports genital mutilation, slavery, and genocide.
Why do these atheists pick out those particular things, slavery and genocide?
We can't know the intentions of any individual, so I don't know.
We can't know the intentions of any individual. So when Smith buys a gun and then breaks into Jones's home, and Smith's hand points the gun at Jones's chest, and Smith's finger pulls the trigger, did Smith intend to murder Jones? We can't know. We can't know Smith's intentions because we can't know the intentions of any individual. Or suppose that one car runs over a child in the road and the driver gets out and appears distraught and says it was an accident. And another car runs over a person in the road and the person who was hit was the driver's business partner and the driver will be the beneficiary of a large life insurance policy. It's too bad that the court system draws distinctions between negligent homicide and intentional homicide because they're not as smart as Deconverted Man. It's too bad that judges and lawyers and legislators across all of human history, well, they don't know that we can't know the intentions of any individual.
Are particularly egregious sins.
Okay. So, if they grew up in a culture that said that sin was, or that slavery was fine, then they'd be okay with slavery. Maybe, yeah. And that would be true.
That's not exactly the argument. The argument is that American culture says that slavery and genocide are particularly bad. Lots of cultures say that those two things are bad, but American culture says they are particularly bad.
Probably of you as well.
Nobody can know with a high degree of certainty how they would have turned out if they had grown up in a different society. But there's a big difference between me and the two goofballs in the video I was critiquing. I reasoned my way out of the cultural mainstream of my society. I am against the cultural mainstream of my society. They are with the cultural mainstream of their society.
Well, let's see where your point is.
Of course, you would probably say that slavery and genocide are objectively bad things, and I
don't know if I'd say objectively, but I'd say they certainly are not very pleasant for the people who are being, having that thrust upon them. And societies that practice it don't seem to be very good societies. They don't seem to last that long. They seem to have all sorts of problems, and they eventually change or collapse over time.
They don't last that long. Slave societies existed for much longer than non-slave societies. Also, if a few battles in the Civil War had gone differently, the Confederacy would have won and it would have continued to practice slavery for much longer. Probably on that alternate timeline with an independent Confederacy, there would still be slavery in the American South in 2022.
They seem to have all sorts of problems.
Problems according to who? Mauritanians would say that America has all sorts of problems with decadence, cowardice, and promiscuity.
And they eventually change or collapse over time.
No, they don't. And I'm glad he brought this up because I think this is one of the key topics that undergirds a person's overall view of history. Slave regimes did not collapse. Slave regimes were killed off by abolitionist regimes. The abolitionist North invaded the South and ended slavery by force. European colonial empires forcibly abolished slavery in much of the Middle East and in Africa. For a while, Belgium was cheating, and they were pretending to be abolishing slavery while actually purchasing slaves from Muslim slave merchants and forcing them to serve in the Belgian Congo army. But when British abolitionists found out about this, Britain brought international pressure onto Belgium, which forced Belgium to reduce and eventually abandon slavery. That is, Belgium abandoned the use of slavery in its own armies. I believe there are some remote areas of the Congo in which slavery is still practiced.
So it seems that slavery is something that eventually humans recognize is not a sustainable.
Slavery is very sustainable. It lasted for thousands of years. Slavery existed for far longer than, say, democracy has existed.
Way of doing things is, you have a very few people controlling a large amount of people by force. Eventually those large amount of people are going to turn on the ones controlling them. So
that's just not accurate. Historically, that is not what happened. Slave societies were almost never toppled by slave revolts. They were killed off by aggressive outside powers. And I'm probably belaboring the point. But the reason why Deconverted Man is incorrectly claiming that slavery is unsustainable is because he doesn't want slavery to exist, because he holds the values of the culture in which he grew up. But he doesn't want to say that there is a moral duty to abolish slavery, because if he said that, then he would be admitting that there is such a thing as an objective moral duty, and that's hard to square with his atheist worldview.
I don't know if I'd say objectively.
But if there is no moral duty to abolish slavery, then what's going to stop a modern society from starting slavery back up again? Deconverted Man would definitely not be comfortable with a modern society practicing slavery, and that's why he pretends that slavery is an unsustainable social system. Because if Deconverted Man doesn't want there to be any slave societies, and he doesn't want to say that there is a moral duty to abolish slavery, then he has to say that slavery is unworkable, that it's an unsustainable social system.
And it's true that most societies today condemn slavery and genocide, but there are differences of emphasis. Many cultures answer no to the question, is genocide okay? But some cultures emphasize condemnation of genocide, and other cultures emphasize condemnation of other sins. In modern
I don't know why it would matter what is emphasized.
It matters because it means that the emphasis on slavery and genocide is not universal. And if the emphasis on condemning slavery and genocide is not universal, what does that say about atheists who have those moral priorities? Moral priorities with special emphasis on condemning slavery and genocide. It shows that those atheists, who call themselves free thinkers, are part of a particular culture, and they have the provincial viewpoint of the time and place in which they live, a viewpoint which is shared by most Christian cultures, but is not shared by other cultures or other time periods. That doesn't necessarily mean they're wrong, but it does call into question their claim that they're free thinkers.
Let's see, murder, yeah. Theft, bad, yeah. Slavery's bad. Cowardice, I don't know about that being bad. Is cowardice a sin? Genocide, okay, yeah, that's bad. Envy, I don't really see envy as being that bad of a thing necessarily. Promiscuity, depends on how that works out. Treason, yeah, I think that could be pretty bad. Sloth, I don't really see what's really wrong with that.
Christianity teaches the infinite value of the lowliest person's life, and that the last shall come first in heaven. And it's a short step from there to an extreme concern, I would say.
All right, well, you say Christianity teaches, but there's no way that you could possibly hope to demonstrate that, because to say that all of Christianity does that, well, you're going to need some major research to back that assertion up. You're going to need to have a wide-scale survey of Christian churches.
This idea that we can't make any generalizations about what a religion teaches without some kind of gigantic survey, it's just not a serious argument.
Yeah, well, it's in the Bible, yeah.
It's not just in the Bible, it's in the gospel, and specifically it's in the words attributed to Jesus. And Deconverted Man, if you disagree that the last shall come first is a Christian teaching, then find me the quotation from Jesus that describes someone as a genetically inferior subhuman. Or find me the quote from Jesus where he sounds like Ayn Rand and he talks about how the great must not be constrained by the small, and how great kings and warriors must not be held back by the mewling peasants with their endlessly hungry mouths. I'd be very interested to see that passage. I'm waiting. Please send it to me.
Different things are emphasized in different churches. Different things are taught by different churches.
Yeah, but overall there are patterns.
Now consider atheism. There were some people in the 1940s in Germany.
All right, but they weren't using evolution, they were using eugenics.
Not evolution, they were using eugenics. So when a farmer has cows that produce slightly more milk, and he breeds them in order to produce more cows that produce slightly more milk, is this evolution or eugenics? When humans created dogs and different breeds of dogs by selecting for certain traits over tens of thousands of years, starting when humans were just barely humans themselves, is that evolution or eugenics? When parents choose to invest their resources in their own child, not in some foreign stranger child, is that evolution or eugenics? All sexual attraction is attraction to a desire to breed with members of one species who seem strong, healthy, intelligent, competent. Is that evolution or eugenics? Evolution created us with eugenic impulses like sexual attraction because creatures that act in eugenic ways will be selected for. That is, they will on average have more fit offspring and a better chance of passing on their genes.
That doesn't matter. Yeah. This is just poisoning of the well. So it's like, oh look, these people were atheists, and then they did bad stuff. Therefore, atheism bad.
That's not the argument. The point is that there's a certain kind of person who usually lives in the West and describes themselves as a skeptical atheist. We've all met this kind of person. Deconverted Man, you are an example of this type of person. And when you meet this kind of person, you notice that almost all of them have almost exactly the same moral values as each other. So why is that? Why do almost all of them have almost exactly the same values? Are these just the correct values? The values that any intelligent person would come to? Well, no, because we can look around the world and we see that there are other cultures which don't have the same values. Okay, so could it be that the values which modern atheists hold are logically related to atheism in some way? Could that be why almost all skeptical atheists hold almost exactly the same values? No, that can't be it either, because we can look back in history and we see that there have been cultural movements led by atheists which held wildly different moral values from the skeptical atheists of today. That's the point of the Nazi example. The argument for which the Nazi example is relevant is, 1, if skeptical atheists were free thinkers, either there would be a great diversity of moral opinion among skeptical atheists, or skeptical atheists would agree on a set of moral values which were derivable in some way from atheism. 2, there is not much diversity of moral opinion among skeptical atheists. 3, if the set of moral values which today's skeptical atheists agree on were derivable in some way from atheism, then atheists elsewhere in the world and in other historical eras would have held approximately the same set of moral values. 4, but it is not the case that atheists in other historical eras held approximately the same set of values as today's so-called skeptical atheists. Instead, we see that prominent atheists and prominent atheist-led cultural movements in the past held moral values which are radically at odds with the moral values of today's skeptical atheists. It's also worth noting that the moral values of the skeptical atheists are exactly the same moral values which are pushed by the cultural mainstream of the time and place in which these self-described skeptical atheists live. Conclusion, therefore, skeptical atheists are not really free thinkers. And the delicious irony of this is that not only are the skeptical atheists' moral values the same moral values which are pushed by Hollywood, the newspapers, the universities, the government, and the rest of the cultural mainstream of the time and place in which these self-described skeptical atheists live, they also are the same moral values that are espoused by the religion which was historically dominant in the cultures in which the skeptical atheists live. Now, Deconverted Man is going to say that I'm going beyond the evidence, but let's be serious about this. Is it just a big coincidence that the morals of skeptical atheists just so happen to be the same as the morals pushed by all the authority figures in mainstream American culture? Which just so happen to be the same as the morals espoused by Christianity? No, of course that's not a coincidence. Another reason to look at the Nazi example is that the West is currently becoming more atheist and less Christian, and if we want to know what kind of morals an atheist society would hold, we can get some insight by looking at past atheist-led cultural movements. I'm not saying that a future atheist society would be exactly like past atheist-led cultural movements, but looking at history is one line of evidence. There might not be any system of objective ethics that is derivable from an atheist position, but different moral worldviews may be more or less psychologically satisfying in light of an atheist position. And so there will be some moral worldviews which are especially psychologically compatible with atheism, even if there is no moral worldview which can be derived from atheism by pure logic. We should expect that as a society becomes more atheist, it will move toward moral worldviews that are more psychologically compatible with atheism, and away from moral worldviews that are less psychologically compatible with atheism. The Nazis thought that their moral worldview was psychologically compatible with atheism. Deconverted Man says that he has a good argument against the Nazis' argument. If Deconverted Man has an argument like that, let's hear it.
They're going to hell, right?
He seems to think I'm a Christian. I'm not.
These two goofballs think they're atheists, but they are...
Well, if they think that they're atheists, then they are.
Then he does this again.
really unwitting Christians.
No, they're not. Now you're reading into their brains, which is not possible to do.
I don't know where he's getting this from. Deconverted Man, if you make a response to this, I'd be interested to know where you're getting this idea from. The idea that you can't know anything about another person's mind or brain. And it's not just him. I've seen this in quite a few people. People who seem to think that the normal rules of inference somehow don't apply to inferences about people.
These are people who have grown up in a Christian culture, and they have imbibed...
Deconverted Man disputes the claim that America is a Christian culture. When I say America is a Christian culture, I mean that America has historically been a Christian country, and most Americans are self-described Christians. Turkey has historically been a Muslim country, and most Turks are self-described Muslims. America, Mexico, Brazil, Poland, and Hungary are Christian cultures. Turkey, Persia, Egypt, and Yemen are Muslim cultures. After that, I'm not sure if he was being serious, but I think he asked for evidence that there has historically been a dominant Christian majority in America. So here's the evidence. This is from Gallup, showing church membership among adults going back to 1940. It was stable at around 70% up until 2000 and has been declining since then. This question is reported here as, are you a member of a church, mosque, or synagogue? But the question used to be just church. I don't know exactly when they changed it, but I have data here on religious denominations showing in 1948, 69% Protestant, 22% Catholic, and 4% Jewish. And it certainly would have been less than 1% of any other religion at that time. And then as recently as 2004, 50% Protestant, 24% Catholic.
You know, because I could accuse you, I could say, hey, you're borrowing your morals from Zoroastrianism, because Zoroastrianism was before Christianity and Judaism. Everything is borrowed from somewhere.
No, it isn't.
If it comes before it, technically you could say everything is borrowed from whatever came first.
No, that's not valid. Sometimes different people come up with the same idea independently. The argument that A came before B, therefore B must have been caused by A, is an invalid argument. Just because some religion came before some other religion and the two of them have some similar beliefs does not mean that one borrowed from the other. When I point out atheists who have Christian morals, the point is that the Christian morals are not universal. They're not universally held by all cultures around the world, especially the extreme condemnation of genocide and slavery in modern American culture. That's not universal. And so when people go around calling themselves atheists, but they have those exact moral positions, it's extremely suspicious that they claim to be free thinkers, and yet they have exactly the same moral beliefs as the religion of the people among whom they grew up.
Well, I've found that sometimes atheists are better Christians than Christians in a way.
Yes, exactly.